This is the Retro XP Podcast, a podcast dedicated to retro video games from the first and second generation with the Odyssey and the Atari 2600 all the way up to Gen 7 with the Xbox 360 and the PS3. On today's episode, I'll be talking about one of my other top 10 favorite games of all time, and this one's about Silent Hill 2 for the PlayStation 2. This comes hot off the heels of the recent film based off the game, Return to Silent Hill, and we are now in the midst of a resurgence of the franchise with a new entry that came out last year called Silent Hill F, an upcoming remake of the first title by the same team that worked on the Silent Hill 2 remake, Bloober Team, and a completely new franchise title developed by Konami themselves again, which who knows when we're going to get that. We're also supposed to get another choose your own adventure Silent Hill game maybe coming out this year. I'm not for sure. I haven't heard much about it recently, but Silent Hill 2, as you know, is one of the most iconic horror games of all time and well beloved by its fan base, including myself. As you might guess, this episode will have heavy spoilers. So if you haven't played the original title or even the remake, I would highly suggest you do that before listening to this episode. This is a game you not only play, but also experience. I want to thank the editors on Wikipedia and the Silent Hill Wiki for all the notes and research that they did. I based a lot of my notes and research off of what they put out. So let's get started. Retro XP is part of the Hair of the Dogcast network, so be sure to check out patreon.com/Hair of the Dogcast to check out every show the network has and get access to the exclusive community Discord. There is a free 30-day trial available if you want to try it out. Otherwise, you can follow me on X, Threads, and Instagram, and YouTube at RetroXPodcast, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. Be sure to follow and enable notifications so you can find out when I drop a new episode. So, Silent Hill 2 is a 2001 survival horror game developed by Team Silent, a group within Konami Computer Entertainment Tokyo. And the game was published by Konami for the PlayStation 2. This game first released in North America on September 25th, 2001. An extended version containing a bonus scenario, Born from a Wish, and other additions were published for the Xbox in December of that same year. In 2002, it was ported to Windows and then re-released for the PlayStation 2 as a greatest hits version, which included all that bonus content from the Xbox port. A remastered high-definition version was released for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 in 2012 as part of the Silent Hill HD collection, which was Silent Hill 2 and 3. We will talk about that later. A remake developed by Bloober Team was released on October 8th, 2024 for the PlayStation 5 and Windows, and also came out recently this past October for the Xbox Series Systems 2. Development of Silent Hill 2 began in June of 1999, soon after Silent Hill 1 had been completed. The game's narrative was inspired by the Russian novel Crime and Punishment, which was put out in 1866 by Fyodor Dostoevsky, and some of the influence of the game's artistic style include the works of film director David Lynch and paintings by Francis Bacon and Andrew Wyeth. Cultural references to history, films, and literature can be found in the game as well. In contrast with the previous title, whose narrative concerned cult activity, Silent Hill 2 focuses directly on the psychology of its characters. And if you've never read Crime and Punishment, I don't blame you. I haven't either. Although I think after doing the research for this episode, I think I may want to pick it up. Crime and Punishment follows the mental anguish and moral dilemmas of Rodion Raskolnikov. I should have practiced that before. An impoverished former law student in St. Petersburg who plans to kill an unscrupulous pawnbroker, an old woman who stores money and valuable objects in her flat. He theorizes that with the money, he could liberate himself from poverty and go on to perform great deeds, and seeks to convince himself that certain crimes are justifiable if they are committed in order to remove obstacles to the higher goals of, quote, extraordinary men. Once the deed is done, however, he finds himself racked with confusion, paranoia, and disgust. His theoretical justifications lose all their power as he struggles with guilt and horror, and is confronted with both internal and external consequences of his deed. So you can imagine now how the themes of this book coincide with the themes of Silent Hill 2, if you know what I'm talking about. Very interesting book. I've heard a lot of good things. The main developers of Silent Hill 2 were Masashi Tsuboyama. I should have practiced these two. The game's director, Akihiro Imamura, who was the producer, Shigeru Murakashi, who was the game's drama director, Hiroyuki Awaku, which is the game's writer, Takayoshi Saito, who did the game's CGI cutscenes, and of course, Akira Yamaoka, who did the sound design and the very popular and very notable soundtrack. There were a small team that busted their ass to make this game and delivered what was pretty much close to a masterpiece. The game features a third-person view with various cinematic camera angles, something the series is very well known for. The default control for Silent Hill 2 has James moving in the direction that he is facing, and when the player tilts the analog stick upwards, so like tank controls. Although players can choose a more traditional control scheme within the options menu, although for us at the time, tank controls were pretty standard. So Silent Hill 2 does not use a heads-up display. In order to check your health, location, and items, ammo, whatever, you have to pause the game to review your statics. And the health status basically showcases as visual static in red coloring over your character's face. Throughout the game, you collect maps, which can only be read if there is a sufficient light, and of course when his flashlight is on. So if you're in a dark area and your flashlight's not on, you can't even read your map because you can't read in the dark, which is pretty unique game mechanic at the time. I gotta admit. He also updates relevant maps to reflect locked doors, clues, and obstructions, and writes down the content of all the documents for future reference. Maps aren't really essential to proceed through the game. You don't need to get them, but they do give you a significant advantage in exploring the world. And I mean that because you'll be in areas like the apartment complex and the hospital with a lot of locked doors. And the map will help you with your backtracking. And you do a lot of backtracking in this game. Much of the gameplay consists of navigating the town and finding keys and other items to bypass doors, other obstructions. Less focus on killing enemies, really, and that's a key to remember, by the way. Occasionally, puzzles will be presented, often with riddles left for the player to interpret. The difficulty levels of the enemies and the puzzles are determined independently by the player before starting the game, so if you want to play with kind of hard puzzle difficulty, but easy enemies, you can totally do that. So it depends on what kind of style of gameplay you have. Some of the puzzles in this game are very unique. A lot of them kind of are pretty challenging, I would say, if you don't have that kind of like cognitive ability to like maybe read a poem or like listen to a story or like decide how to decipher a code or something like that, reading a journal entry or reading a newspaper article. There's a lot of game puzzles like this in here that are once you get it, you're going to feel pretty smart, but some of them can be pretty convoluted, like the more popular one with the coins in the apartment complex. And the coins all have like there's an old man, I think there's a snake, and then there's a tree or something like that. I forget off the top of my head now. Should have practiced this part too. But yeah, you have to put the coins in a certain order in order to unlock this big dresser. So it's very, very interesting. Some of the puzzles are easy. Some of them are a little bit challenging. So depends on what what you're into. Nowadays, if you play it, you have the internet. But back then, we didn't. At least not in the way we know the internet now. The radio is a key feature in a lot of Silent Hill games. You keep a radio in your pocket, which alerts you to the presence of creatures by emitting static. This allows you to detect them even through the thick fog or darkness. So you know when they're coming because you hear your radio start to go off. Similar to the first game, the player can choose to turn off the radio if you want. I don't know why you would. Your character also tilts his head in the direction of a nearby item or monster, which can give you clues to items that the player may miss while playing, which is kind of nice because you walk into a room and then you'll see, your character like tilt his head and it's like, okay, something's there. Throughout the game, you find 3 melee weapons, 3 firearms. Another 2 melee weapons can be unlocked during replays. I think one of them is a samurai sword, I think. James can move and shoot when you have the handgun, but he cannot move and shoot with the shotgun or the rifle. James can aim up or down, so you have to rely on auto aim. No specific targeting points like we're used to now to this day. Health can be restored through the form of drinks and first aid packs. So that's pretty much the gist of the gameplay. It's like I said, it's a very cinematic presentation that the game displays. Most of the time, you're controlling your character from the kind of like behind the back third person perspective, but there's also some moments too where you may see a cinematic room or a cinematic scene where like now you have to like control up, like tank controls, so to speak. But those are far and few in between. So now on to the plot. While not, like I said earlier, this game doesn't focus on characters and plot threads of the first Silent Hill game, so there's no correlation. Silent Hill 2 takes place in the series' namesake town, located in Maine, which we found out now with this one. But yeah, totally different scene. So your name is James Sunderland, and you received a letter from your wife, who died 3 years prior to the start of the game, and I say 3 years in quotations. In my restless dreams, I see that town, Silent Hill. You promised you'd take me there again someday, but you never did. Well, I'm alone there now, in our special place, waiting for you. I know I can't read it in the same way the original voice actors can, so I apologize if you're listening to this and you're like, ugh, that's a terrible reading. So I'm sorry, okay? The letter confuses James, of course, as he narrates it into the intro of the game. And then he's looking over the town of Silent Hill, and he's thinking to himself, well, what was their special place? Despite James wondering if the letter's a prank by someone with a twisted sense of humor, he notes that the letter's definitely written in Mary's handwriting. And the author is aware James once made a promise to return to Silent Hill with Mary, and that he never fulfilled that promise. After leaving this observation deck and walking to Silent Hill, which is covered in a dense fog, James enters a graveyard and meets Angela, a nervous young woman who came to the town searching for her missing mama, or she means mother. She warns him that there's something wrong with the town and that it could be dangerous, but he ignores it, saying, I really don't care if it's dangerous or not, and needs to find someone too. He moves on and makes his way to the derelict town. Maybe Mary is at Rosewater Park. It's a special place that they spent time at when they were last here. In addition to this kind of omnipresent fog, the whole town seems to be rotting away and abandoned. Macabre, vaguely humanoid creatures are roaming the streets and attempting to attack James whenever possible. Some of them are crawling, they're spitting at him, they're trying to attack him physically. The first creature he encounters is called the Lying Figure, and it's a representation of a creature in a body bag, per se. The sign of a corpse, so to speak, from which it rides from side to side every time it kind of like approaches him. Its movement represent a hospital patient squirming in agony, I guess. And he encounters this creature at the end of an alley for the first time, and also where he discovers the radio going crazy when this monster draws near. Picks up a 2x4, which is his first enemy, and dispatches this enemy indiscriminately. And when he discovers that the path to his first destination, Rosewater Park, is blocked, he decides to pass through an apartment complex to reach what he believes could be this special place Mary mentioned in her letter. Weird roundabout way, but when you're wandering through Silent Hill, it's kind of like an open town, an open area, but it's also kind of a single path, and you'll be going through streets and areas within the town that are going to be blocked by either road construction, a wall literally within the middle of the town, or a large gaping hole in the middle of the street. So it's very much curated to have you follow a specific path. So inside the apartments, James briefly encounters a little girl named Laura, who steps on his hand before running away. Soon after that, he finds Pyramid Head, which we all know who Pyramid Head is, a humanoid monster whose head is completely obscured by a giant metal pyramid-shaped helmet. This is pretty much the most iconic villain in Silent Hill history, and is often misrepresented in future titles because of its personal association to James. And I'll speak more on that personal association later, but I always interpreted Pyramid Head as very specific to James. And when I saw it in other forms of media, I'm like, you're not using that accurately. You're not using what Pyramid Head represented accurately enough. It's just basically almost like what do they call it? Like a mascot, almost. And Pyramid Head's a little bit more than a mascot. James later meets a young man, Eddie Dombrowski, who is vomiting into one of the apartment toilets. The sound effects for this scene is hilarious. Every time I hear it, it's just like, anyway, you have to hear it. Eddie defensively responds to questions regarding a corpse in the refrigerator of the apartment room he's in. I didn't kill that guy. He was there like I got here. Another. So you basically leave him to his devices. He's like, I'll feel better. In another apartment complex, James finds Angela again, lying in front of a large mirror, depressed and with a flat affect, contemplating suicide. And she has this knife in her hand that she's kind of twirling around on the floor. James is trying to talk her out of it and tries to persuade her to hand him the knife for her own safety. She gets extremely scared when he approaches closely to her, and she flees, basically putting the knife down on a dresser and then just gets out of there. Here, right after this scene, is kind of where we experience our first otherworld transformation, where basically you open a door and you jump over this small chasm into another apartment building where it's basically looks completely different than the apartment building you were just in. Basically, it turns into a gritty, grimy, macabre, hellish world, literally right in front of your eyes. Everything about it just looks like it's straight out of hell. The walls are rust-coated, bloodied, monsters infect the hallways. James's odd encounter with the pyramid head, toying with the new monster, the mannequin, can be seen in one of the apartment complexes. James hides in a closet and sees this interaction happen. And we see this, obviously, the enemy, the mannequin, which reacts to light and starts to approach you. If you walk around without the flashlight on, the mannequin doesn't really respond to you unless you touch it, which is kind of, the game doesn't explain that to you. You just have to figure that out. So the mannequin itself is a physical manifestation of a set of upper and lower legs bound to an intermediate torso, representing that of a mannequin dummy. They lack a fully human appearance because James himself refuses to remember what they represent. The creature's bare legs brace on each other, on top and on the bottom, whatever, which are similar to the orthotics that Mary needed to walk during her illness. That was the idea with the art design. The creatures have tubes on their abdomens, which are also owed to James' memories of the hospital. The visual representations of the tube scars are very slight, easy to miss. Actually, in my research, I didn't notice that they were there until I was actually researching this. One person's name I forgot to mention, which if you missed it, I apologize that I didn't say it right away. But Masahiro Ito, who is one of the creature designers and art directors of this game, pretty much is the face of Silent Hill. His art design, his art direction, and he did all these creature animations. He did all these creature designs. So everything pretty much that we know about Silent Hill is, I would say, almost owed to this guy. So I apologize that I missed him in the beginning. I don't know how I did that, but I just remembered that reading this, and I'm like, man, how could I have missed talking about him? So James meets him at the end of his journeys throughout the apartment complex, and despite thinking you can take him out with your weapons, and I'm talking about Pyramid Head here, you can actually run around avoiding his extremely slow and deadly attacks without attacking him. And a lot of people don't know this because you think like, oh, I'm just going to like start pelting him with bullets, but you don't really have to do that. So over time, you'll hear the sirens go off, which it basically is the first time you hear the sirens that basically tell you like, hey, the other world is coming into view and coming into, real life. So you start hearing this siren, and it forces him to leave on his own accord down a spiral staircase that's in the room that you're in. After James leaves the apartment building, he finds the girl he previously met humming to herself on a graffiti-covered wall. He confronts her in frustration, and she reveals to James that she knows Mary, and that he never loved her anyway, which shocks James into how he thinks he knows her. Like, how do you know Mary? Of course, he jumps off the other side of the wall before James can get more information from her. When James finally reaches Rosewater Park, he, meets a woman who he is dumbfounded. He said, Mary? And she turns around and she's like, who's Mary? So basically, Maria is the woman that's standing in front of her, who appears nearly identical to his recently deceased wife. But of course, she's wearing more of a revealing outfit than Mary ever wore, and possessing a little bit more of an arrogant attitude. During their time together, of course, Maria reveals insight into matters that only he or Mary would know. And of course, Maria acts in a very seductive manner towards James, trying to seduce him. Maria, I'm going to go back and forth between Mary and Maria. a lot. I apologize. Maria accompanies James in his attempt to reach his second suspected special place, which is the Lakeview Hotel that he and Mary once stayed at. In his travels, James enters Pete's Bolorama, where he meets Eddie again. "How could you just sit there and eat pizza?" James exclaims. Eddie's pretty much indifferent to it all. He doesn't care. He's just like, whatever. World's crumbling around me. I'm just going to sit here and eat pizza. He also spots the little girl, Laura, who runs away from James upon seeing him. Eddie reveals to James that her name is actually Laura. He was talking to her before James kind of came in and just, interrupted them. Outside, actually, when James escapes the bowling alley outside, Maria claims to have seen Laura, and out of concern for her, has James tried to pursue the girl. After passing through Heaven's Night, which is a local strip club, James and Maria see Laura enter Brookhaven Hospital, so they follow. Interesting thoughts is if you go around and read some of the art and some of the advertisements on the wall, Maria is noted to be a dancer in this club. So take that for what you will. While exploring the hospital, Maria becomes sick and rests in a hospital room. Here, you explore the hospital and solve some puzzles. A weird puzzle, especially that involves a human hair. I'm not going to, if you know, you know. And of course, you encounter another monster variant here, which is the Bubblehead Nurse, which is besides Pyramid Head, probably the most iconic monster in this game, so to speak. So the Bubblehead Nurse is a female humanoid creature that appears in a very low cut and very torso-revealing nurse outfit. The heads are wrapped in pretty much like a thin vinyl mask that contains like a semi-liquid, kind of bloody, liquidy substance underneath this mask, and it covers the surface of their face. This liquid trap mask gives the head a swollen appearance reminiscent of Mary's swollen head and face during her illness and hospitalization. The bottom center of the mask takes the shape of an infant's face, actually, sometimes obscured by a red square covered in dried dirt or blood, which symbolizes James and Mary's desires to have a baby themselves. Now, these symbolisms and these kind of manifestations of these monsters through the eyes of James are actually kind of described a little bit by the Masahiro Ito, who basically in a lot of interviews kind of said like, well, this was the impetus to how I designed the nurse outfit. This was the reason why I designed the, other monsters in this game. These were manifestations of what James sees. So every monster James sees is a kind of like a visual representation of what he's being tormented by. So interesting kind of thoughts. Like you can see those monsters and have your own interpretations, which I think a lot of us do. A lot of us see like, well, maybe this nurse represents, these feelings that James had. But ultimately, in the end, I would say it's all in what the artist interprets it. That's me. That's how I feel. So further in, James finds Laura in one of the rooms. He becomes angry at her for claiming to have known Mary for the past year. He called her a liar, in clear contradiction to his belief that she had been dead for 3 years. Laura was saying, I knew Mary last year. Laura said she had a letter from Mary and encourages James to follow her so she can find it. She, of course, tricks him by locking him in a room filled with 3 caged monsters called the Fleshlip. That's an interesting name. Fleshlip is a creature bound to a grid-like lattice with a mouth located on its abdomen. The mouth is pretty hard to see because the enemies themselves are hard to see in this sequence because they dangle from the ceiling and they kind of drop in to the ceiling and then drop back down. So basically, the Fleshlip represents James's memory of Mary in her sickbed. Its flesh is reminiscent of broken skin, similar to Mary's disease. The lattice evokes a bed frame. The monsters James encounters don't have mouths, actually, up until this one. And the mouths in the future monsters that he encounters basically represent the verbal abuse James received during Mary's illness and treatments. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So interestingly enough, a segue, the developers didn't really define what kind of illness she had. And with the few little tidbits of what her symptoms were, it leads it to have it be like an aggressive form of cancer. It could be like kind of like Hodgkin's lymphoma. It could be other different things that whatever she had, it sounded terrible and it sounded painful and it just sounded grotesque. Like I can only imagine what it is. There's a little bit more insight into the disease that she had with some of the things that you find in the Silent Hill 2 remake, but that we're not talking about the remake. We're talking about the original, the OG. After these flesh lips are defeated, the hospital undergoes a sudden dramatic change to the other world now, where James, all of a sudden now it's the hospital's decrepit, macabre, same kind of setting what we experienced in the apartment. James returns to the hospital room to find Maria missing now. James later finds Maria in the hospital basement, just randomly in the room. However, Maria's pretty pissed, pretty scared, basically claiming to James's face that, why did you abandon me? You don't seem to care about me at all. And you don't seem to care about me. I almost died, because the scene happens with Maria's like, hi, James. And James is like, oh, Maria, it's you. Anyway. And then Maria jumps in saying, anyway, what do you mean anyway? Why didn't you try to save me? All you care about is that dead wife of yours. Damn. After she calms down, they continue to search for Laura. Pyramid Head appears and chases both James and Maria through the hospital basement. Very tense sequence. Very, very tense sequence, because you don't know what's happening. You can't look behind you because you just hear the music escalate and you just hear Pyramid Head behind you. So you're running, you get to the elevator, Maria's behind you in tow, and then as the creature manages to catch up to you, basically impales Maria through the back with his large sword, with his butcher sword, so to speak. I don't know how else to describe it. I mean, it's a brutal scene with Maria on the tails of James, and she was moments away from getting on that elevator with James, and yeah, so the elevator doors close. Pyramid Head just basically drags Maria back, and James slumps down on the floor, alone again and saddened by the loss of Maria. Basically stands up once the elevator gets back up to the main level, and he's like, okay, gotta find Mary. He leaves the hospital and finds a key buried beneath a statue in Rosewater Park. So he goes back to the park. And of course, this leads him to Silent Hill Historical Society and down a long and dark stairwell that seemingly leads on forever, with the faint groaning of a mysterious creature in the distance. It's a terrifying scene to play, even to this day. And it's like you're going down this long stairwell and it just keeps going and going and going. And you're going and you're wondering, is this going to end? And you keep going and going. It is wild. And you can put this metaphorically that James is kind of trying to dive deep into his psyche of what he's in denial of and what he's trying to uncover, so to speak, within his own mind. He enters, obviously at the end of the stairwell, he enters into Toluca prison and finds Eddie in the cafeteria with a gun in hand, joking about a dead guard and a dead dog there. Said they were dead when I got here. Yeah. Seems to be losing it more and more. And of course, he wanders off afterwards. Further into the prison, and then you get into a labyrinth afterwards, which is accessible through a couple of deep holes that require James to jump into blindly with no sight of the bottom. He basically gets to a hole and says, there's a hole here. You can't see down. Do you jump in? And you do this like 2 or 3 times. Wild. Basically, when you get out of the prison, you encounter these Mandarin monsters. They have female bodies wrapped in tape, oversized arms with these grotesque mouths at the end of them. They don't attack James directly, but they climb and crawl underneath his feet in certain areas of the labyrinth, which is kind of very unsettling. In this area, James finds Maria, miraculously alive and locked in a prison cell, when he greets him with memories of Mary. This is a very, very interesting scene, played out mostly in a CGI cutscene. And you get there and she's just sitting in the chair. James exclaims, "You're alive. I thought that thing killed you. Where's all the blood?" Maria, confused, claims that she was, they were simply separated in the hospital basement and that she had not been killed. She continues, "You were always so forgetful. Remember that time in the hotel? You said you took everything, but you forgot that videotape we made. I wonder if it's still there." And then James is kind of confused. He's like, "Wait, aren't you Maria?" And then she flicks a switch and says, "I'm not your Mary." It's like, whoa, so well done. And then even like she stands up through the bars, she puts her hand on James's face. And she's like, "Feel this? I'm real." And confused him a lot. This was such an iconic scene. I mean, Maria's voice actress did so well here. So good. James tells her that he will free her, but upon reaching the other side of the cell, through a series of other labyrinths and hallways, he discovers that she's been mysteriously murdered. All of a sudden, her corpse is on this bed, bloodied corpse. Like it's shocking to see because like how did this happen? And he spirals into a panic again, watching her die again. James enters into another part of the labyrinth after this room and finds Angela in a room cowering in the corner, scared of this monster lurking toward her. The monster in question is called Abstract Daddy and is a creature resembling two figures intertwined on top of a bed. And if I have to be precise and gruesomely detailed, basically this is a personification of two people in a reclining sexual position over a bed frame with someone trapped underneath the body of another person over top. And basically they're both trapped in this kind of like fleshy skin-like substance covering both bodies. Basically, this is a manifestation of the trauma Angela sustained from the sexual abuse by her father and her brother, seen abstractly through the psyche of James himself. Masahiro Ito, I talked about the lead creature designer of Silent Hill 2, spoke on this in an interesting way, saying, "Only Angela knows what she sees, her abstract daddy. James, players, and you or I can't see what she sees. We are on James's side. And who can say abstract daddy, which James sees, is the same as what she sees?" And this is where Silent Hill 2, or at least the town of Silent Hill 2, has brought on basically whatever's the character's personal torments, and the monsters are kind of abstracts of what they see, how they interpret them. And what Angela sees is not the same as what James sees, and what Eddie sees is not what, Angela sees, so to speak. Angela expresses her distrust in James, and just men in general after this boss battle, from her experience that men only want one thing. You can imagine what she means by that. She also calls James a liar who didn't want Mary around anymore before leaving the room after the fight. How did Angela know that? Near the end of this labyrinth, James finds Eddie, who has pretty much snapped at this point after a life of bullying and verbal abuse by his peers due to his physical appearance and him being overweight. Eddie reveals that he did kill the dog of a bullying football player and then shot the dog's owner in the leg as well. It became clear that pretty much Eddie is mentally unwell and is willing to kill the next one to laugh at him. James, unwisely after this point, asks Eddie, "Have you gone nuts?" prompting a battle between James and Eddie in a meat fridge area. Nice one, James. Talk about reading the room. James kills Eddie in self-defense, and he feels shocked and ashamed of himself to have killed a human. And he just repeated it over again. "I killed a human being." James questions his perception of the events leading to his arrival in the town pretty much right after this. After this fight, actually, if you access your inventory and you try to find Mary's letter, you'll inspect it and find it completely blank. It's kind of interesting little tidbit. James exits the labyrinth and rows a boat to Lakeview Hotel in hopes of finding Mary now. So you're rowing your boat on the lake, completely covered in fog. You don't know where you're going. There's a small light that you see. Just follow the light. Get there. You get onto the coast where, you enter the hotel, and this has to be the special place Mary was talking about, right? You get to the hotel's restaurant, and James finds Laura, and she gives him the letter she claimed to be seeking earlier, which reveals that Mary wanted to adopt her, and confirms Laura's claims of knowing Mary for the past year, which is kind of confusing James all crazy. She also explains in this letter that, James may seem a little bit off-putting or a little bit gruff, but he's a kind and sweet man. So hopefully that she is able to accept him for who he is. Obviously, he's going through his trials, watching his wife slowly fade away in front of him. After the trial and tribulations with puzzles and doors in this hotel, you find a videotape in the hotel offices in the basement. And then you go to room 312, the room both James and Mary stayed in. James watches a videotape. He apparently left the hotel 3 years ago, which shows something quite shocking and pretty dramatic. He watches an innocent video of Mary standing by the window, relaxed and feeling bliss at the view outside of their hotel room. She wishes she could stay here forever. And then, obviously, that thought is interrupted by this uncontrollable coughing, and James brings the camera down. The scene skips next to Mary, lying on a hospital bed, uncovered with James looking over her. The next scene shows him smothering her with a pillow, extinguishing her life. The video ends. For a few moments after this, James silently sits, and you have this melancholy piano music playing with this kind of like slow lo-fi beat in the background that's just paints the anguish that James has finally realized to himself. He's realizing the truth, facing his own psychological guilt. He killed Mary. He killed her. Laura, ready to leave the town, finds James, walks into the room, and chooses to reveal the truth to her. Laura is furious at him for killing Mary and screams and cries, saying, "I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. Mary loved you." And she basically exits the room without saying another word after that. The radio after this springs to life in the hotel room, and he hears Mary's voice in this radio telling him to come find her, come find me. James explores the rest of the hotel, leaving the room, obviously discovering that he's now in the other world again. It's decrepit and rotting, and now nothing more than the remains of a building that seemingly has experienced a fire. Entering through a maze of doorways, seemingly leading nowhere, he ends up in a room with a staircase leading upwards, engulfed in flames, and Angela is at the foot of them. She is flanked by two bloodied and skinned bodies hung up on a wall, which seemingly represents her brother and father, dead, of course, because there is a news article that you discover that kind of alludes to a girl who stabbed her father in the neck with a butcher knife. And I think we are led to believe that Angela, having had enough of everything, basically attacked and killed her father and brother. So this obviously could be kind of visual representations of her, father and brother's corpse hanging on the wall. Angela at first hallucinates and thinks James is her mama. Mama said, "I deserved what happened. Don't pity me. I'm not worth it. Or maybe you think you can save me. Will you love me? Take care of me? Heal all my pain?" Angela asks him to return her knife so that she can end her life, but James does not comply. This scene is so impactful because there was one part of this that I interpreted differently because you're seeing this in third person. You're seeing both characters in this scene when she starts talking, and then the scene changes to your viewpoint, you as James looking up at Angela, and she's facing the camera, she's facing you, and she says the words, "Don't pity me, I'm not worth it, or maybe you think you can save me." She says these lines that I just repeated, and it's kind of led you to believe, you have this connection to Angela to say, I can save this girl, I can take care of her, I can heal her pain, whatever. And the scene after that is basically James's head down, and he doesn't say anything, says nothing. And she's like, "That's what I thought." And it's like, man, it's so many small little scenes in this game that are just so impactful. And this is definitely one of them. Basically, Angela turns away from this point and ascends the burning staircase, and James just states that the room is hot as hell. To which she turns around and replies, "For me, it's always like this." Basically means as you think it is. Her life was always a living hell. And then Angela disappears. Such a good scene. Such a good scene. Basically, after you get out here, you enter the hotel lobby. James finds Maria resurrected again and high up on a balcony, bound upside down in this cage and just screaming for James's help. And interestingly enough, right before you enter into this balcony area, there's a wall with, I want to say, 9 red squares on a wall, which is where you manually save. And where you find manual save points is just personified by one red square. You go to it, and then it's like you basically see a reflection of yourself in this red square, so to speak. And when you get to this point here, it's 9 squares, kind of in a full square. And basically what each square represents is some sort of physically manifested torment that appears in the game. And this kind of like 9 versions of punishment that James himself goes throughout this game. I didn't know that until much later. I didn't put those pieces together until I actually started reading more about it kind of as the years progressed. And I'm like, oh, that makes sense. That's wild. It's wild. So obviously at this scene, Maria's screaming for help while being bound upside down. She's immediately impaled by 2 pyramid heads that are just flanking her. Man, it's tough to see this again and again and again. James drops to his knees and then obviously realizes to himself that pyramid head has been created to punish him for his sins. Basically says, I was weak. That's why I needed you. I needed someone to punish me for my sins. And in this scene, he's referring to Pyramid Head, who was a manifestation of James's guilt at this time. Punisher, I would say, if you will. After they are, you get into this 2 Pyramid Head boss battle. After they are sufficiently weakened, they basically impale themselves with their own spears, as to indicate that their purpose has been fulfilled. James has finally come to terms with what he's done. And then one final boss after this. And the boss depends on how you played the game. You either fight Mary or Maria. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a bit. So James, after this scene, is running down this long hallway, and he hears a memory of a previous interaction that him and Mary had while she was still alive. In this situation, James had brought Mary flowers, but she refused him, yelling in an exacerbation at James, stating that she was too disgusting. She was too ugly to deserve flowers. Get out of here. Go. Leave. I don't want you to see me. Of course, you just hear all this from Mary's perspective, and by the end of the conversation, Mary just starts crying and desperately pleads for James to stay with her. Don't leave. Stay with me. Ugh. Such a gut-wrenching scene. You can choose to skip this, obviously, by running through the hallway and then just getting to the end and skipping the whole sequence, you monster. So there are 3 real endings to this game. 2 joke ones and 1 kind of wild supernatural one. The first ending is called Leave. Basically, James reaches the hotel rooftop and sees a woman whom he mistakes for his late wife. It's not Mary, but it's the vindictive Maria who's actually dressed up like Mary, who then makes a final attempt to get James to accept her. James says no, and then Maria turns into a monster similar to those hanging monsters in the hospital. Basically, she flies around and just shoots moths at James, which of course causes damage. And upon her defeat, James is granted a final meeting with Mary, where it's basically in that same room where James kind of snuffed the life out of her. And she's laying in this bed, and James is just sitting right beside her. Basically, James says he is begging her for forgiveness. And Mary said, I wanted my life to end. I wanted you to end my life. Which, of course, in this time he reluctantly accepted, but he also says that wasn't the only reason why he, killed her. He wanted her out of the way, and he wanted his life back. Mary then responds, if that were true, then why do you look so sad? Mary denies that as the reason he killed her and hands her a letter telling him to go on with his life, literally 1 moment before, leaving this world, so to speak. James, at the next scene, leaves Silent Hill together with Laura, And to get this ending, you have to keep your health high, heal as often as you can, check Mary's photo and letter often in your inventory, and don't spend too much time with Maria. So when she's following you, you just keep going, leave her behind a lot. Don't check up on her in the hospital. And of course, in the hospital, when you listen to the final conversation Mary had with James, where she blasted him, or actually in the long hallway at the end, listen to the whole conversation entirely. The water ending is a little bit more depressing. The same boss battle ensues, and the same final ending happens when Mary and James have that one last conversation. James arrives at the conclusion that he's unable to live without Mary, realizing that he came to Silent Hill to basically commit suicide in a place of memories. James then drowns himself by driving into Toluca Lake with his wife's corpse in the car so that they can be together in death. A view from under the lake with bubbles rising to the surface is seen in the end, and the confirmation that Mary's body is in the car at the beginning of the game is actually quite unsettling. A lot of people thought, like, well, I wonder if, she's in there from the beginning, and I think a novelization on Silent Hill 2 confirmed that, yeah, she was in there the whole time. To get this ending, throughout the gameplay, keep your health as low as possible. Check Angela's knife in your inventory often. Read a diary found on the top of the hospital roof, and of course, listen to the whole conversation in the hallway at the end. In the Maria ending, which I think arguably is probably the worst one, the woman in the final boss room will identify as Mary, who has not forgiven James for killing her. She will then turn into the final boss, and of course, after her defeat, there is no final scene with Mary. No, nothing. James returns to Rosewater Park to stare at the water. Maria, of course, resurrected again, shows up, asks James if he killed Mary again. James says that wasn't Mary, implying that he believes she was just a hallucination or a manifestation. James basically professes his love for Maria and wants to be with Maria. So then they both leave together. As they leave, however, Maria starts coughing, implying that she is suffering from the same illness as Mary. You better do something about that cough, he says to Maria. To get this ending, you have to heal constantly. Keep Maria with you, and don't even bump into her when you're roaming the town. So try not to bump her or knock her over or anything like that. Spend a lot of time with her, of course. Check up on her in the hospital. She tells you to do something, you go do it right away, and even go back into the room in the jail cell after you see her corpse in that scene where she tells you, "I'm not your Mary." And of course, don't listen to the conversation in the hallway at the end. So skip that, run through that hallway and skip through that as quickly as you possibly can. Brutal, man. This is brutal. But it's an option. The other two are kind of silly. One's the UFO ending, where UFOs take James away by the hands of Harry Mason, who was the first game's protagonist. You can only get this one on the second playthrough, and during the second playthrough, you get this blue gem, and you have to use it at 3 places. The Brookhaven Hospital Garden, and in the front of the rowboat on the dock before going to the hotel, and in room 312 of the hotel before even putting the VHS tape in it. So those are the 3 key moments you have to do. Use that. The dog ending has to have you complete the 3 main endings, and then on your 4th playthrough, you obtain a dog key in a doghouse near Jack's Inn in town, and use it on the door to the observation room, which is on the 3rd floor of the Lakeview Hotel. In the hotel, James discovers a dog who has apparently been controlling all the events of the game from a large cartoony computer console beyond a locked door. In disbelief, James exclaims, "So it was all your work?" He says this in Japanese, and the dog licks him. Game over. Well, I've never gotten this one because I don't think I've ever beaten it 4 times in one save. But yeah, I've seen it. I've seen the video. It's quite interesting. The rebirth ending is kind of the wild one. After defeating Maria on the rooftop, and it doesn't matter how you play this, James rows a boat with Mary's corpse to the Church of Rebirth on Toluca Lake Island, where he intends to use relics contained throughout the game to resurrect Mary with the help of the old gods of Silent Hill. These relics are the White Chrism in Blue Creek, Lost Memories at Texan Gas, Obsidian Goblet in the Historical Society, and Crimson Ceremony in the reading room of the Lakeview Hotel. Interesting. Really don't know what happens after this. There's really nothing in the ending that shows or says James was successful. So, yeah, those are pretty much the endings. we got Silent Hill HD Collection, which was a compilation remastered HD versions of Silent Hill 2 and 3. This came out on the PlayStation 3 and 360 in 2012. It contained new voice actors for the characters of both. I wouldn't say both games. I think they kept the original voice actors for Silent Hill 3, but for Silent Hill 2, it contained new voice actors. But it also gave you the option to listen to the original cast of Silent Hill 2. Unfortunately, one of the big controversies about this game was the royalties from this game didn't go to the original voice actors. And while the new voice actors got royalties and did a fine job, it didn't hold a candle to the original cast, I gotta say. The game was a bit buggy as well, something which Konami never fixed with an update, really. So I don't recommend playing this unless you really have no option. The Born from a Wish DLC came with the Xbox version of Silent Hill 2, like I mentioned previously. It was a prequel of sorts that had you play as Maria. She wakes up in Heaven's Night, that strip club I talked about earlier, and wanders into the decrepit town of Silent Hill and finds herself in a mansion called the Baldwin Mansion. Ernest Baldwin, the proprietor of this mansion, tells Maria about a bad man named James coming to town. And it is during this conversation that Maria begins to have faint memories of Mary herself, and even finds a teddy bear that she thinks Laura will like. The DLC ends with Maria going to Rosewater Park, hoping for James to accept her. So Silent Hill 2 sold over 1 million copies in the first month of its release in North America, Japan, and Europe, and most of the units sold in North America, of course. Total sales, from what I understand, total new sales, got to about 1.28 million. And it is considered by many as the best horror game of all time, obviously the best Silent Hill game in the franchise, and is one of the best games in the PlayStation 2 to have, period. So why is this game on my top 10 list? And still to this day reigns as my favorite horror game of all time. And it's due to so many factors. The atmosphere, totally unsettling. It made your skin crawl. It made you uncomfortable. It made you terrified of what was around the corner, what was beyond the fog, what was beyond the dark. The sound design was so top-notch. The musical score was probably one of my favorite soundtracks in a video game of all time. Haunting, melodic, soothing, terrifying. The voice acting, I mean, top-notch. Despite the game being produced largely by a Japanese team, which is kind of crazy. The voice actors portrayed their characters so well at this time, which was kind of unique at this time. Like nowadays, we have better direction with voiceover teams, better technology that can showcase emotion as we can see in the Silent Hill 2 remake. But for what they had at the time, they delivered so much. I didn't talk about this, but the scene at the end of the game, right before the credits, Mary narrates that letter to James. In my restless dreams, I see that town. There was definitely more in that letter that she begins to narrate. It is so heartbreaking. It is so emotional and impactful and just full of sadness and grief that even to this day, every time I hear it, I tear up. There's points in the letter where the voice actress her voice breaks with sadness and almost tears in her eyes, showcasing such good emotion. The voice actress, Monica Taylor Horgan, did such a great job in this game. She played both as Mary and Maria. Fun fact, actually, the letter reading she performed in one take. She, of course, lost it a little bit after reading it. And, of course, the producers in the room were left shook and silent afterwards for quite a long time. And she said this in an interview, and I think it was like, all right, I think we nailed it. I think it's Guy Cheehee, who played James, did amazing as well. Playing kind of an oaf, a little bit like he doesn't know what's going on, but also quite a melancholic, saddened protagonist coming to terms with everything happening around him. Interestingly enough, he has his own YouTube channel, GC Navigator, where he shared some behind-the-scenes stuff from motion capture. Interestingly enough, when I was looking at some video clips of this game, someone posted a comment saying, this scene would have been better if Angela and I were in the room together, but it's still a great, impactful scene. And it led me to believe, were you the voice actor of James? And sure enough, the comments underneath them were like, yeah, this is the guy. This is the voice actor of James. So it's kind of cool that he hasn't posted anything in 4 or 5 years. And it's kind of been it's like a series of random things that he's posted, but still cool, interesting. like I said, he shared some stuff that he obtained from behind the scenes in Silent Hill 2 when he filmed it or when he shot it. What shocked me the most about this game really was, for obvious reasons, the bombshell ending and the reflection afterwards. Everything you experienced in this game meant something. They had meaning, they had symbolism, metaphors, and it personified James's grief, sadness, anger, loneliness, sexual frustration, and denial so beautifully. I'll never forget when I beat this game. I was sitting in my bedroom. I was 20 at the time, and I was like in utter shock. I reflected for a long time on what I witnessed and experienced. And I remember calling my friend who also beat the game a couple days before I did. I called him. I was like, we need to talk about this game. So we got together one night later on, I want to say maybe a couple days after that, drank coffee till like 3 or 4 in the morning at this like 24-hour restaurant, talking about it and what we each thought. All what we thought of, like, well, what did this mean earlier in the game? What did that mean later in the game? And going through playing it a second time, you start to pick up on those little things. You're like, that makes sense. That's what that means. Oh, that's why he said that, or that's why she said that. I mean, not many games, even to this day, have made me feel in such a way. And we have a lot of copycats like this that are following the same formula, but I don't think anyone has even like held a candle to the original. And I got to say, even to this day, the genre of psychological horror was made because of this game. Silent Hill 2 basically put psychological horror on the map for us in video games. It shocked all of us at the time. None of us expected the rope-a-dope we got. None of us did. You got a little bit of like tidbits, and you're like, something's not right here in this town. So then, of course, the bombshell ending, it was like, oh. I played the original game frequently, and even though the remake itself is great adaptation to the original game, faithfully recreated, adding new story beats to it, and of course, new acting, new technology, nothing beats the original. I can only say that really because I played the original at the beginning. I was there from the start. Admittedly, when you look at it from like modern sensibilities, it doesn't age well in the control scheme. There's better third-person action games nowadays. But once you understand the control scheme, it's actually easy to move around. It's not really that hard. The combat, though, is quite clunky too, but I guess you can say it's all part of the charm. And unfortunately, there really isn't a way to play the original without having a physical copy of the PlayStation 2 version or the Xbox version. I'm not advocating you play the HD collection. Just don't. It's not available to download either on any storefront. I actually checked Good Old Games before recording, and I was like, it's not even on here. Which is wild to me. The remake is the best you've got, really, unless you have a PlayStation 2 and a used copy of the game that you pick up secondhand. Although the game's value itself hovers around the $170 mark, complete in box. That's crazy. Crazy. And the game still stays with me, almost as if I'm lost within the town as well myself. I've never played a game like this before 2001. And when I picked it up, I mean, I can't think of another game that affected me in such a profound way. The way the game's writers and developers metaphorically made a protagonist's grief, denial, inner struggles manifest into a physical space, into the physical world with like monsters, demons, sound design, level design was just amazing. It was like crazy what they could do. I couldn't believe at the time that video games could be so profound and tell such an amazing story. At this time, video games were just seen as a novelty. They weren't expected to have these like grandiose storylines. Like, it's crazy. It's one that will stick with me forever. And I recommend to anyone who's even remotely interested in horror games, play Silent Hill 2. Well, that about wraps things up in this episode. So be sure to follow me on my socials on X, Threads, and Instagram at RetroXPodcast. Whatever podcast platform you're listening to on, be sure to follow and enable those notifications so you can find out when I drop a new episode. I got to say, Silent Hill 2 ranks up there pretty high. I talked earlier that I don't want to rank my top 10s. I do have a 1. I do have a number 1, but I didn't want to rank the other ones because they all are in the top 10 for very specific reasons. But I do got to say Silent Hill 2 is up there pretty high. It's not number 1, unfortunately, but it's pretty high up there. So thanks for listening, guys.